23 bodies. That's how many hit the floor of Harbor Ridge Medical's emergency room in the first 8 minutes after the northbound interstate collapsed into a fireball. Avery Lawson watched a resident drop a scalpel mid-incision because his hands were shaking too hard to hold it. She watched a charge nurse freeze at the triage desk, staring at the blood pooling under the automatic doors like she'd forgotten her own name. She watched the ER chief turn 3 shades of gray and walk straight into a supply closet without coming back out. And then she heard someone scream, "We're going to lose them all!" That's when Avery moved. No one knew her name yet. She'd been at Harbor Ridge for 9 days. Quiet, kept her head down, worked nights, the kind of person you pass in the hallway and forget 2 seconds later. But now, with the chaos turning lethal and the leadership gone silent, she did something no one expected. She stopped asking for permission. Before we go any further, if you want to see how this story ends, if you want to know who Avery really is and what she's running from, stay with me until the final word. Like this video, drop a comment with the city you're watching from and let me know how far this story travels. Now let's go back to the beginning. The morning started ordinary. Avery clocked in at 6:47 a.m., 3 minutes ahead of her shift, just like always. She tied her hair back in a low ponytail, clipped her ID badge to her scrubs, and walked past the nurse's station without saying a word. No one looked up. She'd learned early that being invisible was easier than being new. Harbor Ridge Medical sat on the edge of Greyhaven, a coastal city that smelled like salt and diesel depending on which way the wind blew. The hospital was old, built in the 70s, renovated twice, and still falling apart in the places no one bothered to check. The emergency department was a maze of narrow hallways, flickering lights, and equipment that worked just well enough to avoid replacement. It wasn't the worst place Avery had worked, but it wasn't trying to be the best either. She'd been assigned to the overflow wing, the area they used for lower priority cases. Sprained ankles, migraines, drunk sleeping it off. It was quiet most of the time, which suited her fine. She didn't need attention, she needed routine. By 8:15, she'd already restocked 3 rooms, flagged 2 expired medication batches, and caught a labeling error that would have sent a diabetic patient into shock. No one thanked her. No one noticed. The charge nurse that morning was Deanna Wu, a woman in her late 40s who wore her exhaustion like a second uniform. She'd been at Harbor Ridge for 16 years and had the kind of face that suggested she'd stopped expecting things to get better a long time ago. When Avery passed her station with an armful of supplies, Deanna didn't look up from her crossword puzzle. "New girl," Deanna said without raising her eyes. "You know where the linen closet is?" "3rd floor, east wing." "Good. Go get me 4 more blankets. We're short." Avery nodded and turned to go. "And don't take forever," Deanna added. "I'm not signing off on overtime." Avery didn't respond. She just walked. The hospital had a rhythm to it, a low hum of controlled chaos that never quite tipped into disaster, but never settled into calm either. Nurses moved through the halls with the practiced efficiency of people who'd seen it all before. Doctors barked orders. Machines beeped. Somewhere down the hall, a patient was crying. Avery had been in 5 hospitals since she left the service. This one wasn't much different from the others. Same fluorescent lights, same scuffed linoleum, same people who looked at her like she was temporary. Which was fine. She was. At 8:42, the first call came in. Mass casualty event, Highway 29 northbound. Multi-vehicle collision with secondary explosion, EMS inbound. Estimated 20+ critical. Avery heard it over the intercom. She was in the supply room counting gauze packs. Her hand stopped moving. Highway 29 was the main artery into Greyhaven from the north. If it was blocked, half the city was cut off. If there was an explosion, it wasn't an accident. She set down the gauze and walked back to the main ER. Deanna was at the desk when the second call came through. Her face had gone pale. "They're saying it's bad," Deanna said, her voice tight. "Real bad." Tanker truck jackknifed and exploded. Fire spread to at least a dozen vehicles. They're pulling people out of the wreckage now. A junior doctor named Marcus Holt appeared from one of the exam rooms, his stethoscope still hanging around his neck. "How many incoming?" "They're not sure yet. Could be 30. Could be more." Marcus rubbed his face. "Where's Dr. Langston?" "Still in his office." "And Halstead?" "Stuck on the other side of the bridge. He can't get through." Marcus swore under his breath. We need more hands. Deanna looked around the ER like she was counting heads. We've got what we've got. Within minutes, the entire department shifted. Doctors started appearing from offices and break rooms. Nurses abandoned their current patients and began prepping trauma bays. The energy in the building changed, sharpened, tightened. But there was something else underneath it, something that felt like panic trying to pretend it wasn't. Avery moved toward the main ER entrance. She didn't run. Running made people ask questions, but she walked fast, scanning the room as she went. The staff was moving, but they were moving wrong. No clear chain of command, no triage system in place. People were preparing individual bays without coordinating. If the casualties came in all at once, the system would collapse in minutes. She'd seen it happen before. The first ambulance arrived at 9:03. The paramedics came through the doors at a full sprint, pushing a gurney with a man whose chest was split open like butcher paper. Blood poured onto the floor in thick, dark streams. His eyes were open but unfocused, his breathing shallow and wet. Male, mid-30s, steering column impalement, significant blood loss, BP 70 over 40, and dropping. Where's the trauma surgeon? Deanna looked around. Dr. Halstead's stuck in traffic. So is Dr. Parvati. The bridge is shut down. Then get someone else. There is no one else right now. The paramedic's face went white. He's not going to make it to transfer. Deanna's hands were shaking. I don't know what to tell you. Avery stepped forward. Bay 3, now. The paramedic looked at her like she'd just appeared out of thin air. Who are you? Someone who's not wasting time. Move. They moved. Avery didn't wait for approval. She grabbed the gurney rail and helped guide it into the trauma bay, her movements clean and deliberate. She'd seen worse, done worse. But no one here knew that. The second ambulance came in 30 seconds later, then the third, then two more right behind it. The ER exploded. Patients filled every available bed, then the hallways, then the waiting room. Blood smeared across the tile floors. Alarms screamed from every direction. Nurses shouted over each other, orders overlapping into chaos. A resident tried to intubate a patient and missed the airway twice. Someone dropped a tray of instruments and didn't stop to pick them up. Avery watched it all unraveling. A man with a crushed pelvis was bleeding out on a gurney in the hallway because no one had tagged him as priority. A woman with a sucking chest wound was being wheeled into a bay that wasn't prepped for surgery. A child with a head injury was sitting unattended in the waiting room while two nurses argued about paperwork. Deanna was at the triage desk, her hands shaking as she tried to process intake forms that didn't matter anymore. A junior doctor stood frozen in the middle of the hall, staring at a patient whose leg was barely attached. The ER chief, Dr. Raymond Langston, had his phone pressed to his ear, his face slick with sweat. I don't care if the bridge is down. Get someone here now. But no one was coming, not fast enough. Avery made a choice. She walked straight to the triage desk and took the clipboard out of Deanna's hands. Hey, you're not doing triage anymore, Avery said. Her voice was calm, almost flat. You're running intake. Write down names, tag numbers, nothing else. I'll handle priority. Deanna blinked. You can't just... I already did. Avery turned and raised her voice, cutting through the noise like a blade. Listen up. If you're not actively saving a life right now, stop what you're doing and look at me. Heads turned. Not everyone, but enough. We've got more patients than hands. That means we don't guess, we don't hesitate, and we don't second check unless there's time. Red tags go to bay 1 through 4. Yellow tags to the hallway. Green tags to the waiting room. If someone's not breathing and you can't get them back in 30 seconds, move on. We save who we can save. Clear? A nurse in the back, older, graying at the temples, name tag reading Sandra Ortiz, scowled. Who the hell are you? Someone who's done this before. Where? When? Doesn't matter. You want to argue or you want to stop losing patients? Sandra's jaw tightened. But she didn't argue. Avery moved. She re-triaged the first 6 patients in under 2 minutes, tagging them with brutal efficiency. A man with a punctured lung went to bay 2. A woman with a compound fracture got pushed to the hallway. A teenager with a head wound that looked worse than it was got sent to the waiting room with a pressure bandage and a cold pack. Wait, he's bleeding. Superficial, he'll live. Next. The ER started to stabilize. Not perfectly. But enough. Avery worked the room like a conductor, directing traffic without ever raising her voice. She told a terrified intern exactly where to place a chest tube. She walked a nurse through a manual blood pressure check when the machine glitched. She caught a medication error before it reached the patient's IV line. And no one questioned her anymore. Marcus Holt appeared at her side, his face flushed. "You're the new nurse, right, Lawson?" "Yeah." "Where'd you train?" "Everywhere." He frowned but didn't push. "Bay 4 needs a central line placed. Can you do it?" "Yes." "Then go." She went. The patient was a woman in her 50s, unconscious. Her veins collapsed from blood loss. Avery prepped the site, found the subclavian vein on the first attempt, and threaded the catheter in with the kind of precision that only came from doing it 100 times under worse conditions. The intern assisting her stared. "That was fast." Avery didn't respond. She just moved to the next patient. At 9:34, a man in Bay 1 started seizing. No doctor available. No time to wait. Avery grabbed the Ativan and pushed it into his IV line without hesitation. A nurse grabbed her arm. "You didn't get an order. He's seizing. The order is implied." "That's not how it works." "It is now." The seizure stopped. The man's breathing steadied. The nurse let go of Avery's arm but didn't walk away. "You're going to get yourself fired." "Maybe." At 9:47, a man in his 50s went into cardiac arrest in Bay 3. No doctor available. No time to wait. Avery grabbed the defibrillator. "Charging to 200. A nurse hesitated. "You're not authorized." "Clear." She shocked him. Once? Twice? On the third shock, his heart kicked back into rhythm. The room went silent for half a second. Then the machines started beeping again, and everyone went back to work. But Avery felt the shift. People were watching her now, not with gratitude, with suspicion. Sandra Ortiz approached her near the supply cabinet, arms crossed. "You're not just a nurse." Avery didn't look up. "I am now." "That's not an answer." "It's the only one you're getting." Sandra's eyes narrowed. "I've been doing this for 23 years. I know what combat medical training looks like." "Where'd you serve?" Avery turned to face her. "Somewhere you didn't." "That's not cute." "I'm not trying to be cute. I'm trying to keep people alive." Sandra leaned in. "You think because you know your way around a trauma bay, you can just walk in here and take over? We have protocols. We have a chain of command." "Your chain of command walked into a closet and didn't come back." Sandra's face flushed. "You don't know what you're talking about." "I know exactly what I'm talking about. And if you want to keep arguing, we can do it after the last patient stops bleeding." Sandra stared at her for a long moment. Then she turned and walked away. But Avery knew the damage was done. She'd crossed a line. And once you crossed it, there was no walking back. At 10:15, the chaos finally started to ebb. The last critical patient had been stabilized. The hallways were still crowded, but no one was dying in the open anymore. Avery stepped back from the triage desk, her scrubs streaked with blood that wasn't hers. Her hands were steady. Her breathing was even, but inside, the old familiar weight was settling back into place. Deanna approached her slowly, like she was approaching a stray dog. "How did you know how to do all that?" Avery didn't look at her. "Training." "What kind of training?" "The kind you don't forget." Deanna hesitated. "Are you military?" Avery didn't answer. "Because if you are, you need to tell HR. There are protocols for veterans returning to civilian care, benefits, support systems." "I don't need support." "Everyone needs support." Avery finally looked at her. "I just need to work." Deanna opened her mouth to respond, but before she could, the main doors opened again. 3 people walked in. Not paramedics. Not hospital staff. 2 men in dark suits. 1 woman in a gray jacket with a badge clipped to her belt. Federal agents. They walked past the blood-stained gurneys, past the exhausted staff, past the patients still waiting for care. Their eyes scanned the room with the kind of precision Avery recognized instantly. Then they stopped. Right in front of her. The woman spoke first. Her voice was low, controlled. "Avery Lawson?" Avery didn't move, didn't blink. "We need to talk." The room went still. Every nurse, every doctor, every person within earshot turned to stare. The taller agent stepped forward. His name tag read Agent Dawson. You're wanted for questioning regarding Operation Silent Ridge. Avery's chest tightened. That name. That mission. The one she'd spent 3 years trying to bury. I don't know what you're talking about, she said quietly. The woman tilted her head. Her badge read Agent Voss. Yes, you do. Agent Voss reached into her jacket and pulled out a tablet. She turned the screen toward Avery. It was a photo, grainy, taken from a distance, but unmistakable. Avery in uniform, helmet off, blood on her hands, standing in the middle of a burning village with 12 bodies behind her and a rifle slung across her back. The caption underneath read, Sole Survivor, Investigation Pending. The nurse standing closest to Avery took a step back. Deanna's voice came out thin and shaky. What is this? Agent Voss didn't take her eyes off Avery. That's what we're here to find out. Avery's hands were steady. Her face was blank. But inside, everything was collapsing. She'd saved 23 people today. And now they were going to ask her why she didn't save 12 more. Marcus Holt pushed through the crowd, his face flushed with anger. You can't just walk in here and interrogate my staff in the middle of a crisis. Agent Dawson turned to him. This isn't an interrogation. It's a conversation. She just saved half this ER. That doesn't change what we need to discuss. Marcus looked at Avery. Do you know these people? Avery didn't answer. Sandra Ortiz stepped forward, her voice sharp. If she's some kind of fugitive, we have a right to know. Agent Voss finally looked away from Avery. She's not a fugitive. She's a person of interest in a classified military incident. What kind of incident? Sandra demanded. The kind we don't discuss in public. Deanna's hands were trembling. Avery, what is she talking about? Avery met her eyes. It doesn't matter. It clearly does. Not to you. Agent Voss pocketed the tablet. Ms. Lawson, we can do this here, or we can do this at the federal building downtown, your choice. Avery looked around the room. Every face was turned toward her, some confused, some scared, some already condemning her without knowing what she'd done. She'd spent 3 years running from this moment, 3 years building a life so quiet, so small, that no one would ever look twice. And now it was over. Give me 5 minutes, Avery said quietly. Agent Voss shook her head. We're leaving now. I need to finish my charting, unless you want a malpractice suit added to whatever else you're investigating. Agent Dawson exchanged a glance with Voss. She nodded. 5 minutes. Don't make us come find you. They stepped back but didn't leave. They stood near the entrance, arms crossed, watching. Avery walked to the nurse's station and picked up the nearest chart. Her hands didn't shake. Her breathing didn't change, but inside she was already calculating. Deanna followed her. Avery, talk to me. There's nothing to talk about. They're accusing you of something. They're asking questions. That's different. Is it true? Were you in the military? Avery didn't look up from the chart. Yes. What happened? Something I can't fix. Deanna's voice dropped. Did you do something wrong? Avery finally looked at her. I did what I had to do. And 12 people died anyway. Deanna's face went pale. Avery set down the chart and walked toward the agents. She didn't say goodbye. She didn't look back. As she passed Marcus, he grabbed her arm. You don't have to go with them, he said quietly. You can call a lawyer. You have rights. Avery pulled her arm free. I know my rights. Then use them. I already did, 3 years ago. It didn't help. She walked out the door with the agents on either side of her. The ER went silent behind her. Outside, the morning sun was too bright. The air smelled like smoke from the highway fire, still burning miles away. Agent Voss opened the back door of a black sedan parked in the ambulance bay. Get in. Avery hesitated. Where are we going? Field office, downtown. We have some footage we want you to see. Footage of what? Agent Voss's expression didn't change. The moment you decided 12 soldiers weren't worth saving. Avery's stomach turned to ice. She got in the car. The drive took 20 minutes. No one spoke. Agent Dawson drove while Agent Voss sat in the passenger seat, typing something on her phone. The third agent, a younger man whose name tag read Agent Kerr, sat beside Avery in the back, staring out the window like he wasn't part of this. Avery watched the city pass by. Greyhaven was a working town, not pretty, not ugly. Just functional. Warehouses, strip malls, fast food chains. The kind of place people moved to because it was cheap, not because they wanted to be there. She'd picked it for exactly that reason. The federal building was downtown, a concrete block with narrow windows and no personality. They parked in an underground garage and took an elevator to the 4th floor. No handcuffs. No restraints. But Avery knew better than to think she could just walk away. They led her to a small conference room with a table, 4 chairs, and a screen mounted on the wall. Agent Voss gestured to a chair. "Sit." Avery sat. Agent Dawson closed the door. Agent Kerr stood in the corner, arms crossed. Voss pulled out the tablet again and connected it to the screen. The image that appeared was a map, desert terrain, scattered buildings, a few roads cutting through the sand like scars. "Recognize this?" Voss asked. Avery's jaw tightened. "Yes." "Say it out loud." "Kareem Valley, Western Sector, Operation Silent Ridge." Voss nodded. 3 years ago, you were part of a 12-person medical unit embedded with a forward operating base. Your team was tasked with providing emergency care to both military personnel and local civilians caught in the conflict. Is that correct? "Yes." "And on March 7th, your base came under attack." Avery didn't respond. Voss tapped the tablet. The screen changed to a video feed, grainy, black and white, taken from a drone overhead. Avery could see the base, small and angular, surrounded by sand. Then she saw the explosion. The screen flared white for a second. When the image cleared, half the base was gone. 17 casualties in the first 30 seconds, Voss said. Your unit was cut off from the main force. No air support, no reinforcements. You were the ranking medic on site. Avery's hands were flat on the table. "I know what happened." "Then tell me." "You already know." "I want to hear it from you." Avery looked at the screen, at the base, at the bodies she couldn't see but knew were there. "We were treating civilians when the mortars hit," she said quietly. 26 people. Women. Kids. They'd come in from a village 2 miles west after a skirmish pushed through their area. We were the only medical facility within reach. "And your team?" 12 of us. 5 were killed in the initial blast. That left 7. Including you. "Including me." Voss tapped the screen again. The video jumped forward. Avery could see movement now, people running, dragging bodies, trying to find cover. "You were the senior medic," Voss said, "which means you were in command." "Yes." "And you made a call." Avery's voice went flat. "I made a call." "What was it?" Avery looked at Voss. "We couldn't evacuate everyone. The transport was too small. We had maybe 10 minutes before the next wave hit. I had to choose. Between your team and the civilians. Between the people who were already dying and the people I could still save." Voss leaned forward. "You left your team behind. I evacuated the civilians first. Why? Because they had a chance. My team didn't." The room went silent. Agent Dawson spoke for the first time. His voice was rough, older. "You're saying your own people were unsalvageable." "I'm saying they were combat personnel. They knew the risks. The civilians didn't sign up for this." "That's not your call to make," Dawson said. "It was that day." Voss tapped the screen again. The video zoomed in. Avery could see herself now, younger, thinner, covered in dust and blood. She was dragging a child toward the transport, her face locked in concentration. "You got 20 civilians out," Voss said, "and all 7 of your remaining team members died." Avery didn't look away from the screen. "Yes, including Captain Joel Brennan, your commanding officer, your friend." Avery's chest tightened. "He called for you," Voss continued, 3 times, on the radio, begging for extraction, and you ignored him." "I didn't ignore him. I told him I'd come back." "But you didn't." "Because by the time I got the civilians loaded, the base was overrun. There was nothing left to go back to." Voss let that sit for a moment. Then she turned off the screen. "Here's the problem, Ms. Lawson. The military doesn't see it the way you do. They see a medic who abandoned her unit, who prioritized foreign nationals over American soldiers, who may have violated her oath." Avery's voice went cold. "I saved 20 lives. You let 12 die. I let 12 die so 20 could live. That's the job. That's not the job, Dawson said. The job is to protect your own. Avery stood up. Then the job is broken. Agent Voss stood as well. Sit down, Ms. Lawson. Am I under arrest? Not yet. Then I'm leaving. Well, you walk out that door, and we'll have a warrant by the end of the day. Avery's hands curled into fists. For what? Doing my job? For dereliction of duty, for insubordination, for causing the deaths of 12 soldiers. I didn't cause their deaths, the mortars did. You chose not to save them. I chose to save who I could. The room went silent again. Agent Kerr shifted uncomfortably in the corner. Voss and Dawson just stared at her. Finally, Voss spoke. Sit down, please. Avery sat. Voss took a breath. We're not here to prosecute you. Not yet. We're here because new evidence has surfaced. Evidence that suggests you may not have been the only one making decisions that day. Avery frowned. What are you talking about? Voss pulled out another file and slid it across the table. 3 weeks ago, a former intelligence officer came forward. He claims that Operation Silent Ridge was compromised before you ever set foot on that base. Avery opened the file. Inside were documents, mission briefs, communication logs, satellite images. Compromised how? She asked. Someone leaked your position, Voss said. The attack wasn't random. It was targeted, and whoever gave up your location knew exactly when you'd be most vulnerable. Avery's blood ran cold. You're saying someone set us up. We're saying it's possible. Who? That's what we're trying to find out, and we need your help. Avery looked down at the file, at the faces of her team printed in black and white. Joel Brennan, Sarah Vega, Marcus Trent, all dead. Why now? She asked quietly. Why wait 3 years? Because the person who leaked the intel is still active, Voss said, and they just resurfaced. Avery looked up. Where? Voss met her eyes. Here, in Greyhaven. The world seemed to tilt. Avery's voice came out barely above a whisper. Who is it? Agent Voss leaned back in her chair. That's what you're going to help us find out. Avery stared at Agent Voss across the table, the words hanging in the air like smoke from a gun that had already been fired. Someone from that mission was here, in Greyhaven, walking the same street she'd walked for 9 days without knowing she was being hunted. You're telling me I've been working next to a traitor? Avery said. Voss didn't blink. We're telling you it's a possibility we can't ignore. Who? We don't know yet. That's why we need you to go back. Avery's laugh came out sharp and bitter. Go back where? To the hospital? You just dragged me out in front of everyone. They think I'm a war criminal. Agent Dawson leaned against the wall, arms crossed. Then you fix that narrative. You go back, you work, you watch. We'll feed you names. You tell us who doesn't fit. I've been there 9 days. I don't know anyone well enough to tell you if they're lying. Then you get to know them, Voss said. Fast. Avery stood up, the chair scraping against the linoleum. This is insane. You want me to spy on people who just watched federal agents parade me out like a suspect? We want you to find the person who got your team killed. The room went silent. Avery's hands were shaking now, just slightly, just enough that she had to shove them into her pockets to hide it. You said new evidence surfaced. What evidence? Voss opened another file and slid a photograph across the table. It was a printout, low resolution, taken from a security camera. The image showed a man in civilian clothes standing outside a coffee shop, talking on a phone. His face was partially obscured by the angle, but his posture was familiar. Military. This was taken 6 days ago, Voss said, 2 blocks from Harbor Ridge Medical. The man in the photo is Lieutenant Derek Collier. He was intelligence support for your unit during Operation Silent Ridge. Avery's stomach dropped. Derek's alive? Yes. I thought he was rotated out before the attack. He was, officially, but communication logs show he was still receiving classified updates on your unit's position up until the day of the strike. And 3 weeks ago, he contacted a journalist claiming he had information about a covered-up war crime. Avery felt the floor tilt under her. What kind of war crime? He didn't say. He disappeared before the meeting. 2 days later, he turned up here. Why Greyhaven? Boss's expression didn't change. That's what we're trying to figure out. But here's the problem. Derek Collier isn't the only person from your unit's support network who's resurfaced. There's at least one other. And we think they're at Harbor Ridge. Avery sat back down. Her mind was racing, pulling apart the fragments of memory she'd spent 3 years trying to bury. Derek Collier had been a background figure, someone she'd seen twice, maybe 3 times. He delivered mission updates, logged radio traffic, and disappeared into the intelligence tent. She didn't know him, didn't trust him, but she didn't have a reason not to. "What do you want me to do?" she asked quietly. Agent Voss leaned forward. "We want you to go back to work. Act like nothing happened. If Derek or anyone connected to him makes contact, you report it immediately. If you notice anything unusual, new staff, strange questions, people who seem too interested in your background, you tell us. And if I don't, then you're obstructing a federal investigation, and we'll bear you with the same charges we've been holding over your head for 3 years." Avery's jaw tightened. "You're blackmailing me." "We're giving you a chance to clear your name," Dawson said. "You help us. We make sure the truth gets out. You don't, and the official report stays exactly the way it is. Medic abandons her unit. 12 soldiers die. Case closed." Avery wanted to flip the table, wanted to walk out and never look back. But she knew they had her. They'd always had her. "Fine," she said. "I'll do it." Voss nodded. "Good. We'll set you up with a contact protocol. Encrypted phone. Daily check-ins. You see anything, you call. Don't try to handle it yourself." "And what if someone at the hospital already knows who I am? What if they saw the photo?" "Then you tell them the truth. You were investigated. You were cleared. You're just trying to move on." "That's not the truth." "Close enough?" Agent Kerr finally spoke from the corner, his voice younger than Avery expected. "For what it's worth, I read the report. What you did that day. It wasn't wrong. It was impossible. And you made the best call you could." Voss shot him a look that could have cut glass. Kerr went quiet. Avery stood. "Are we done?" Voss handed her a phone. Small, black, no markings. "Daily check-ins, 8 p.m. Don't miss one." Avery took the phone and walked out without another word. The elevator ride down felt longer than the ride up. When she stepped outside, the afternoon sun was too bright, the air too warm. She stood on the sidewalk for a moment, trying to steady herself, trying to figure out what the hell she was supposed to do next. Then her own phone buzzed, a text from an unknown number. "They're lying to you." Avery's blood went cold. She looked around, scanning the street, the parked cars, the windows of nearby buildings. No one was watching, no one she could see. She deleted the text and started walking. The walk back to Harbor Ridge took 40 minutes. Avery didn't take a cab, didn't call for a ride. She needed the time to think, to process, to figure out how she was going to walk back into that building without falling apart. The city around her was waking up from the chaos of the morning. Traffic had resumed on the side streets. People were back to their routines. The explosion on Highway 29 was already old news, just another headline people would scroll past on their phones. But Avery couldn't forget, couldn't move on, because the explosion hadn't just brought chaos to the ER. It had torn open the wound she'd spent 3 years trying to close. By the time she got back to Harbor Ridge, it was almost 3 in the afternoon. The ER had calmed down. The blood had been mopped up. The chaos had settled into the usual low hum of controlled disaster. Avery walked through the main entrance and headed straight for the nurse's station. Deanna was there, filling out paperwork. She looked up when Avery approached, and her face went pale. "You're back." "I'm back." Deanna set down her pen. Are you allowed to be here?" "I was never not allowed to be here. The agents asked me some questions. I answered them. It's done." Deanna didn't look convinced. "What kind of questions?" "The kind I'm not going to talk about." Sandra Ortiz appeared from one of the exam rooms, her arms full of linens. She stopped when she saw Avery, her expression hard. "You've got some nerve coming back here." "I've got a shift to finish," Avery said. "Your shift ended 2 hours ago." "Then I'm starting a new one." Sandra dropped the linens on the desk. "You don't get to just walk back in here like nothing happened. Those agents pulled you out in front of everyone. They said you were involved in some kind of military incident. People died." People always die. That's the job. Don't give me that. You know what I mean. Avery stepped closer, her voice dropping. You want to know what happened? Fine. I was a combat medic. My unit got hit. I made a call. Some people lived, some people didn't. The military investigated me. They didn't charge me. That's the whole story. And you didn't think to mention this when you applied? It wasn't relevant. Not relevant. Sandra's voice rose. You've got federal agents tracking you down in the middle of a mass casualty event, and you don't think that's relevant? Deanna stood up, her hands raised. Okay, let's all just take a breath. I'm not taking a breath, Sandra snapped. I want to know if I'm working next to someone who's going to put this hospital at risk. Avery's voice went flat. I'm not the one putting anyone at risk. Then who is? Avery didn't answer. She couldn't, not without blowing the one card she had left. Marcus Holt walked into the station, his stethoscope draped around his neck. He looked tired, his hair disheveled, his scrubs wrinkled. When he saw Avery, he stopped. You came back. Yeah. Why? Because I'm not done. Marcus studied her for a long moment, then nodded. Good. We need you. Sandra turned on him. Are you serious? You're just going to let her walk back in here like nothing happened? She saved lives today, Marcus said. More than anyone else in this room. So yeah, I'm going to let her work. This is unbelievable. Then file a complaint, Marcus said. But do it after your shift. We've still got patients. Sandra glared at Avery, then turned and walked away. Deanna exhaled slowly. That could have gone worse. Marcus looked at Avery. You okay? I'm fine. You don't look fine. I'm functional. That's close enough. Marcus hesitated, then lowered his voice. Look, I don't know what happened back there with the feds, and I'm not going to ask. But if you need to talk to someone, HR, a counselor, anyone, just say the word. I don't. Avery? I said I don't. Marcus sighed. All right. But you're on observation for the rest of the week. No solo shifts, no trauma cases without supervision, hospital policy. Avery wanted to argue, but she knew it wouldn't help. Fine. Good. Now go clean yourself up. You look like you've been through a war. Avery almost laughed. Almost. She went to the staff bathroom and locked the door behind her. The face staring back at her in the mirror was a stranger, pale, hollow-eyed, streaked with dried blood she hadn't noticed before. She turned on the faucet and scrubbed her hands until they were raw, then splashed cold water on her face. When she looked up again, the face was still a stranger. Her phone buzzed. The encrypted one Voss had given her. Check in. Any contact? Avery typed back. No. Keep your eyes open. He's close. Avery pocketed the phone and walked back out. The rest of the shift passed in a blur. Avery worked under Marcus's supervision, handling minor cases, restocking supplies, avoiding eye contact with anyone who looked like they had questions. She sutured a laceration on a construction worker's forearm. She started an IV on a dehydrated teenager. She updated charts, flagged medication interactions, and kept her head down. But she could feel the weight of the stairs, the whispers that stopped when she walked past, the way people moved a little faster to get out of her path. She was a ghost now, present but not welcome. By the time her shift ended at 11, her body was screaming for sleep, but her mind wouldn't shut down. She changed out of her scrubs in the locker room, avoiding the mirror this time, and walked out through the side exit. The parking lot was quiet. The overhead lights flickered in the cool night air. Avery's car was parked in the far corner, under a tree that blocked most of the light. She was halfway there when she heard footsteps behind her. She didn't turn around. Didn't run. Just kept walking, her keys already in her hand, pointed outward like a weapon. The footsteps stopped. Avery? She froze. That voice, low, rough, familiar in a way that made her stomach turn. She turned slowly. A man stood 15 feet away, hands in his pockets, his face half hidden in shadow. But she knew him. Even after 3 years, she knew him. Derek Collier. He looked older, thinner. His hair was longer, his face covered in stubble. But his eyes were the same, sharp, calculating, always watching. You shouldn't be here, Avery said. Neither should you. I work here. For now. Avery's grip tightened on her keys. What do you want? Derek took a step forward, and Avery took a step back. "Relax," he said. "I'm not here to hurt you." "Then what are you here for?" "To warn you." "About what?" "About them. The feds, the people pulling the strings. They're not looking for the truth, Avery. They're looking for someone to take the fall. And they've already decided it's you." Avery's heart was pounding now, but she kept her voice steady. "And you're what? My guardian angel?" "I'm the guy who knows what really happened that day. And I know who set us up." "Then tell the feds." Derek laughed, bitter and sharp. "The feds are the ones covering it up. You think Voss and Dawson are here to help you? They're here to make sure the real story never gets out." "Why would they do that?" "Because the person who leaked our position wasn't some rogue operative. It was someone high up, someone with enough power to bury the investigation. And if that gets out, the entire chain of command collapses." Avery's mind was racing. "You're saying it was an inside job." "I'm saying it was an order, and Joel and the others were collateral damage." Avery's chest tightened. "You're lying." "I wish I was." "Then prove it." Derek reached into his jacket, and Avery tensed, but he just pulled out a flash drive and held it up. "Everything's on here. Mission logs, communication intercepts, financial records. It's all there." "Why didn't you turn it over?" "Because the second I do, I'm dead, and so are you, if you're anywhere near it." Avery stared at the flash drive. "Why give it to me?" "Because you're the only one who can do something with it. You were there. You saw what happened. Your testimony matters." "My testimony almost got me court-martialed." "That's because they controlled the narrative. But if you come forward with this, they can't spin it. They can't bury it." Avery wanted to believe him, wanted to take the drive and blow the whole thing wide open. But she'd learned a long time ago that trust got people killed. "I can't help you," she said. Derek's expression hardened. "Then you're sentencing both of us to death." "That's dramatic." "It's the truth. Whoever leaked our position knows I'm here, knows I have the files, and they're coming for me. If you don't take this, it dies with me. And so does any chance you have of clearing your name." Avery hesitated. Every instinct told her to walk away, to call Voss, to let the feds handle it. But Derek was right about one thing. They weren't here to help her. They were here to use her. "Give me the drive," she said. Derek stepped forward and held it out. Avery reached for it. Then the gunshot rang out. Derek's body jerked backward, his chest blooming red. He hit the ground hard, the flash drive tumbling from his hand. Avery dropped to her knees, her hands already moving to put pressure on the wound. But she knew. She'd seen enough gunshot wounds to know. Derek's eyes were wide, his breathing shallow and wet. "Run," he choked out. "They're here." Avery grabbed the flash drive and shoved it into her pocket. Then she ran. She didn't look back, didn't stop. She sprinted across the parking lot, her heart hammering, her lungs burning. Behind her, she heard more footsteps, running, closing in. She reached her car, fumbled with the keys, and yanked the door open. She threw herself inside and locked the doors just as a figure appeared in her rearview mirror. A man, tall, dark jacket, face obscured by a hood. He raised a gun. Avery started the engine and slammed on the gas. The car lurched forward, tires screeching. A bullet shattered the back window and she ducked, glass raining down on her. She didn't stop, didn't slow down. She tore out of the parking lot and onto the main road, her hand shaking so hard she could barely hold the wheel. She drove for 20 minutes, taking random turns, doubling back, making sure no one was following. Then she pulled into an empty lot behind a closed gas station and killed the engine. Her hands were covered in Derek's blood. Her back window was gone. And in her pocket, a flash drive that might get her killed. She pulled out the encrypted phone and dialed Voss. The line rang twice before Voss answered. "Lawson? Derek's dead. Someone shot him. Right in front of me." A pause. "Where are you?" "I don't know. Somewhere east. I'm not coming in." "You need to come in. Now." "No, you said Derek was here. You didn't say someone was hunting him. You used me as bait." "We didn't." "Don't lie to me. You knew this would happen. You knew, and you sent me in anyway." Voss's voice went cold. "If you run, we can't protect you." "You were never going to protect me." Avery hung up and threw the phone out the window. Then she sat in the dark, her hands still shaking, Derek's blood drying on her skin, and tried to figure out how she was going to survive the night. Because one thing was clear now. Whoever wanted the truth buried wasn't going to stop. And Avery was next. She pulled the flash drive out of her pocket and stared at it. Small, black, innocuous, and holding the key to everything. She started the car and drove. She didn't know where she was going, didn't have a plan, but she knew one thing. She wasn't going to let Derek die for nothing, and she wasn't going to let them win. The road ahead was dark, empty, unforgiving. But Avery had been down worse roads before, and she'd survived. She'd survive this too, or die trying. The city disappeared behind her as she drove north, away from Greyhaven, away from Harbor Ridge, away from everything she'd built in the last 9 days. Her phone, her real phone, buzzed in the passenger seat. She glanced at it. Another text from the unknown number. You took the drive. Good. Now trust no one, not even yourself. Avery's hands tightened on the wheel. She was alone now, truly alone, and the hunt had just begun. She drove until the gas light came on, then pulled into a truck stop just off the highway. The place was almost empty, a few semis parked in the back, a single car at the pumps. Avery filled the tank, paid in cash, and walked inside to the bathroom. She locked the door and turned on the faucet, scrubbing Derek's blood off her hands until the water ran clear. When she looked up at the mirror, the stranger was still there. But this time she didn't look away. This time she stared back. Because the woman in the mirror wasn't a victim anymore. She was a threat. And whoever was coming for her was about to find out exactly what that meant. Avery walked back to her car, got in, and plugged the flash drive into her phone using an adapter she kept in the glove box. The files loaded slowly. Documents, audio recordings, encrypted emails. She opened the first file. It was a mission brief, Operation Silent Ridge, dated 2 weeks before the attack, and at the bottom, a single line that made her blood run cold. Approved by Colonel Richard Tanner, USMC. Avery knew that name. Colonel Tanner had been the operational commander for the entire region. He'd signed off on every mission, every deployment, every strategic decision. If he'd approved the mission knowing it was compromised, then the leak hadn't been an accident, it had been deliberate. Avery scrolled through more files, financial transfers, offshore accounts, payouts to foreign contacts. And then she found the final piece, a recording. She hit play. The audio was scratchy, but the voices were clear. The medical unit is a liability. Too much exposure, too many witnesses. Then eliminate them. How? Make it look like an attack. Leak their position. Let the locals do the work. And the medic? Lawson? If she survives, she's the perfect scapegoat. A disgraced soldier. No one will believe her. And if she doesn't, then the problem solves itself. The recording ended. Avery sat in the dark, her hands trembling, her chest tight. They hadn't just failed to protect her unit. They'd sacrificed them. And they'd been planning to pin it on her from the start. She closed the files and pulled the flash drive out, clutching it in her fist. Derek had been right. The feds weren't here to help her. They were here to finish the job. And now, with Derek dead and the evidence in her hands, Avery was the only thing standing between the truth and the people who wanted it buried. She started the car and pulled back onto the highway. She didn't know where she was going, but she knew one thing. She wasn't running anymore. She was hunting, and whoever came for her next was going to regret it. The road stretched out ahead of her, dark and endless, and for the first time in 3 years, Avery wasn't afraid. She was ready. The highway stretched out like a black ribbon under the stars, and Avery drove with the windows down, cold air rushing through the shattered back window and cutting into her skin. She needed the cold, needed the sting. It kept her awake, kept her sharp. She'd been driving for 2 hours, heading north toward the state line, when she realized she couldn't just run. Derek had given her the evidence, but evidence meant nothing if she was dead before anyone saw it. And whoever killed Derek wasn't going to stop looking. She needed leverage, she needed allies, she needed someone who couldn't afford to let her die. She pulled off at the next exit and found a 24-hour diner, the kind with neon signs and cracked vinyl booths. She parked around back where the car wasn't visible from the road and went inside. The place was nearly empty. A waitress with tired eyes stood behind the counter, pouring coffee for a trucker who looked like he hadn't slept in days. Avery slid into a booth in the corner, her back to the wall facing the door. The waitress came over with a pot of coffee. "What can I get you, hun?" "Just coffee and a phone charger if you've got one." The waitress nodded and walked away. Avery pulled out her phone, the regular one, not the encrypted burner she'd tossed, and powered it on. It had been off since she left the parking lot. Turning it on now was a risk, but she needed to make a call. The screen lit up with notifications, 23 missed calls, 15 voicemails, dozens of texts. Most were from numbers she didn't recognize, but 3 were from Marcus Holt. She opened the first message. "Where are you? Feds are back. They're asking questions." The second, "Avery, whatever's happening, don't do this alone." The third, "Call me, please." Avery stared at the screen. Marcus didn't owe her anything. He'd defended her once, but that didn't mean he'd put his neck on the line again. Still, he was the closest thing to an ally she had right now. The waitress returned with the coffee and a charging cable. Avery plugged in her phone and dialed Marcus. He answered on the first ring. "Avery, where the hell are you?" "Somewhere safe." "That's not an answer. It's the only one you're getting." Marcus's voice dropped. "The feds came back. They're saying Derek Collier was shot outside the hospital. They're saying you were there." "I was." "Did you?" "No, but I saw who did it." "Who?" "I don't know, but I know who sent them." Silence on the other end, then, "You need to come in. Turn yourself in. Let them sort this out." "They're not going to sort it out, Marcus. They're going to bury me with it." "You don't know that." "I do. Because Derek gave me proof, and now he's dead." Another pause, longer this time. "What kind of proof?" Avery glanced around the diner. The trucker was gone. The waitress was in the back. No one was listening. "The kind that proves my entire unit was set up, that the attack wasn't random, that someone high up ordered the leak and planned to blame me if it went wrong." Marcus exhaled slowly. "Jesus. I need help. I need someone who can get this to the right people, someone the feds can't touch." "Avery, I'm a doctor, not a lawyer. I don't know how to—" "You know people. You have connections. Hospital administration, legal. Someone who can get this to the press or Congress or whoever the hell can actually do something with it. And what are you going to do? Stay alive long enough for it to matter." Marcus was quiet for a long time. Then he said, "There's someone. A journalist. Investigative. She's done pieces on military corruption before. I met her at a conference last year. If anyone can run with this, it's her. What's her name? Ellison, Kate Ellison, works for the Sentinel, based out of Capital City. Can you get me in touch with her?" "I can try, but Avery, if you're wrong about this, if the evidence isn't what you think it is, this blows up in your face, and mine." "I'm not wrong." "How do you know?" "Because I heard them, on a recording. They planned the whole thing." Marcus went silent again. Then, "Send me what you have. I'll get it to her. But you need to stay low. Don't contact anyone else. Don't use your credit cards. Don't go anywhere they can track you." "I won't." "And Avery?" "Yeah?" "Be careful. Whoever's doing this, they've already killed one person. They won't hesitate to kill another." "I know." She hung up and stared at the phone. Then she pulled the flash drive from her pocket and copied the files onto her phone. It took 3 minutes. When it was done, she sent the entire folder to Marcus in an encrypted email. Then she deleted the files from her phone, wiped the cache, and turned it off again. The waitress came back over. "You need anything else, hun?" "No, just the check." The waitress set it down, and Avery left a 20 on the table. She walked out into the cold night air and got back in her car. She didn't know if Marcus would come through, didn't know if Kate Ellison would take the story, but it was the best shot she had. Now she just had to stay alive long enough to see it through. She drove west this time, looping back toward Greyhaven, but staying off the main roads. She needed to get back, needed to finish what she'd started, because running wouldn't solve anything. The people hunting her had resources, reach, patience. They'd find her eventually. But if she went back, if she forced their hand, she could control the fight. By the time the sun came up, she was parked on a side street 3 blocks from Harbor Ridge Medical, watching the building through the early morning haze. The ER entrance was quiet. A few staff members trickled in for the morning shift. Ambulances came and went. Everything looked normal. But Avery knew better. She waited until 7:30, then walked into the hospital through the main entrance, not the ER. She kept her head down, her hoodie up, her hands in her pockets. No one stopped her. She took the stairs to the 3rd floor and made her way to the administrative wing. The offices up here were quiet, insulated from the chaos below. She found the door marked Human Resources and knocked. A woman's voice called from inside. "Come in." Avery pushed the door open. The woman behind the desk was in her 50s, gray hair pulled into a tight bun, glasses perched on the end of her nose. Her nameplate read Linda Hargrave, Director of Human Resources. Linda looked up and froze. "Avery Lawson. I need to talk to you." Linda's hand moved toward the phone. "You're not supposed to be here." "I know, but I need 5 minutes." The federal agent said, "The federal agents are lying." Linda hesitated, her hand still on the phone. "About what?" "About everything. About me. About what happened 3 years ago. About why they're really here." "I don't understand." Avery stepped inside and closed the door. "I was set up. My unit was sacrificed, and the people responsible are trying to bury the evidence. Derek Collier had proof. Now he's dead, and I'm next unless someone listens." Linda's face went pale. "Derek Collier is dead?" "Shot last night. In the parking lot. Right in front of me." "Did you?" "No. But I know who did, and I know why." Linda slowly took her hand off the phone. "Sit down." Avery sat. Linda folded her hands on the desk. "Start from the beginning." Avery told her everything. The mission, the attack, the choice she'd made, the investigation that followed, Derek's contact, the flash drive, the recording, the shot that killed him. When she finished, Linda was quiet for a long time. Then she said, "If what you're saying is true, this hospital is in the middle of a federal investigation, which means we're liable, which means I need to escalate this immediately." "To who?" "The board, legal, maybe the authorities." "The authorities are the problem." Linda shook her head. "I can't just take your word for this. I need proof." "I gave the proof to someone who can use it, but that takes time. And I don't have time." "Then what do you want from me?" Avery leaned forward. "I want you to keep me on staff. I want you to tell anyone who asks that I'm on administrative leave pending review. And I want you to make sure the feds don't waltz back in here without a warrant." That's asking a lot. It's asking for due process." Linda stared at her. "You really think someone in the military did this? Deliberately?" "I know they did." Linda exhaled slowly. Then she picked up the phone. Avery tensed. "Who are you calling?" "Legal. If we're doing this, we're doing it right." 2 hours later, Avery was sitting in a conference room with Linda, the hospital's chief legal counsel, and Marcus Holt, the hospital's chief. The lawyer, a man named Gregory Pierce, had the kind of face that suggested he'd spent his entire career preparing for a moment like this. He reviewed the timeline Avery provided, asked pointed questions, and took notes on a yellow legal pad. When he was done, he set down his pen. "Here's the situation. You've made serious allegations against high-ranking military officials. You have evidence, allegedly, that supports those allegations. But you're also a person of interest in an active federal investigation, which means anything you do from this point forward is going to be scrutinized." "I know that," Avery said. "Do you? Because right now you're not just fighting to clear your name, you're fighting to stay out of prison, or worse." Marcus spoke up. "What's the play here, Greg?" Gregory leaned back in his chair. "The play is we protect the hospital first, which means we cooperate with the feds to the extent required by law, but we don't volunteer information. We keep Avery on administrative leave, not terminated, which keeps her employment status intact, and we make it very clear that any further contact with Ms. Lawson requires a warrant or her voluntary cooperation." Linda nodded. "And if they push?" "Then we push back. This hospital has a reputation to protect. We're not going to let federal overreach damage that." Avery looked at Marcus. "Did you reach out to the journalist?" Marcus nodded. "I sent her the files this morning. She responded an hour ago. She's reviewing them now. She said if they're legit, she'll run the story within 48 hours. 48 hours is a long time." "It's the best we've got." Gregory stood. "In the meantime, Ms. Lawson, you stay out of sight. You don't talk to the feds. You don't talk to anyone outside this room. You let us handle the external pressure. And if they come for me anyway?" Gregory's expression didn't change. "Then you call me. Immediately." Avery left the conference room and headed down to the ER. She needed to see it again. needed to remind herself why she'd come back. The ER was busy, but not chaotic. A standard morning. Nurses moved between rooms, doctors updated charts, patients waited. Deanna was at the nurses' station. When she saw Avery, she froze. "You're back." "I'm back. Are you okay?" "I'm fine." Deanna glanced around, then lowered her voice. "People are talking about Derek, about what happened." "Let them talk." "Avery, they're saying you were involved." "I was involved. I was there, but I didn't kill him." "Then who did?" "Someone who doesn't want the truth to come out." Deanna's face was tight with worry. "What truth?" Avery looked around the ER, at the patients, at the staff, at the people who had no idea they were standing in the middle of a war zone. "The truth about what happened to my team, and the truth about why I'm really here." Before Deanna could respond, the main doors burst open. Agent Voss walked in, flanked by Dawson and Kerr. Her face was stone. She walked straight toward Avery. "Avery Lawson, you're under arrest for obstruction of justice and conspiracy to commit murder." The ER went silent. Avery didn't move. "On what evidence?" "Security footage from the parking lot. You were seen with Derek Collier moments before he was shot. You fled the scene. You refused to cooperate with investigators. That's enough." "I didn't kill him." "Then you can explain that at the federal building." Voss pulled out a pair of handcuffs. Gregory Pierce appeared from the hallway, his briefcase in hand. "Agent Voss, I'm Ms. Lawson's attorney. You're not arresting her without a warrant." Voss held up a folded document. "Already got one." Gregory took the warrant and reviewed it. His expression didn't change, but Avery could see the tension in his jaw. "This warrant is overly broad and lacks specificity. We'll be challenging it." "Challenge it in court." "Right now she's coming with us." Avery looked at Marcus, at Deanna, at the faces of the people she'd worked with, saved, bled for. Then she held out her wrists. "Don't," Marcus said. "It's fine." "It's not fine." Avery met his eyes. 48 hours. That's all I need." Voss cuffed her and led her toward the door. As they passed the nurses' station, Sandra Ortiz stepped forward. "Agent, I want to make a statement." Voss stopped. "About what?" "About what I saw yesterday, during the mass casualty event." Voss frowned. "This isn't the time." "She saved 23 people. I counted. 23 people who would have died if she hadn't been here. So whatever you think she did, you better be damn sure before you destroy her." Voss didn't respond. She just kept walking. They loaded Avery into the back of a black SUV and drove downtown. No one spoke. Avery sat in silence, her hands cuffed in her lap, her mind racing. 48 hours, that's all she needed, but she didn't know if she'd last that long. They arrived at the federal building and took her to an interrogation room. Small, gray. A single table and 2 chairs. Voss sat across from her. Dawson stood in the corner. "Where's the flash drive?" Voss asked. "I don't know what you're talking about." Derek Collier had classified files that implicate high-ranking officials in a cover-up. He gave them to you. Where are they? "He didn't give me anything." "We have witnesses who say otherwise." "Then your witnesses are lying." Voss leaned forward. "You're making this harder than it needs to be. Give us the drive, cooperate with the investigation, and we can work something out." "Work out what?" "A deal where I take the fall for something I didn't do? A deal where you don't spend the rest of your life in prison." Avery laughed. It came out harsh and bitter. "You're not offering me a deal. You're offering me a grave." Voss's expression didn't change. "You think you're a hero. You think you made the hard choice. But the truth is, you abandoned your team, and now you're protecting the person who got them killed. I'm not protecting anyone. I'm exposing them." "By running? By hiding evidence?" "That's not exposure. That's obstruction." Avery leaned forward, her voice cold. "I heard the recording. I know what Tanner did. I know he ordered the leak. I know he sacrificed my unit to cover his tracks. And I know you're here to make sure that never gets out." Voss went very still. Dawson shifted in the corner. "Who told you that name?" Voss asked quietly. "Derek, before you had him killed." "We didn't kill Derek." "Then who did?" Voss didn't answer. The door opened and Agent Kerr stepped in. He looked pale. "We need to talk. Now." Voss stood and followed him out. Dawson stayed, his arms crossed, his face unreadable. Avery waited. 5 minutes later, Voss came back in. Her expression had changed. The stone mask was cracking. "You sent the files to a journalist." "I have no idea what you're talking about." "Kate Ellison, the Sentinel. She just called our office asking for comment on a story about Operation Silent Ridge. A story that includes classified intelligence and recorded conversations implicating Colonel Richard Tanner in the deliberate sacrifice of a U.S. military unit." Avery kept her face blank. "Sounds like someone should investigate that." Voss's jaw tightened. "You just signed your own death warrant." "Maybe, but at least the truth's getting out." Voss turned to Dawson. "Lock her up. Holding cell. No phone calls. No visitors." Dawson moved toward Avery, but before he could reach her, the door opened again. This time, it wasn't Kerr. It was a man in a military uniform. A colonel. His name tag read Brennan. Avery's blood went cold. Brennan walked into the room, his hands clasped behind his back, his face calm. "Agent Voss, I'll take it from here." Voss frowned. "This is a federal investigation, and this is a matter of national security, which means it's now under military jurisdiction. You can't just—" Brennan pulled out a document and handed it to her. "Signed by the Joint Chiefs, Miss Lawson is being transferred to military custody pending a formal inquiry into Operation Silent Ridge." Voss's face went white. "This is a mistake." "The mistake was letting this go on for 3 years. We're correcting it now." Voss looked at Avery, then at Brennan. Then she walked out without another word. Dawson followed. Brennan waited until the door closed. Then he looked at Avery. "You're Joel's brother," she said. "I am." "You were at the hospital, the security guard." "I was." "Why?" Brennan pulled out a chair and sat down. "Because I needed to know if you were worth saving, and now I know you are." Avery's hands were shaking. "What do you want?" "The same thing you do. Justice. For Joel. For your team. For everyone Tanner sacrificed." "Then why didn't you come forward sooner?" "Because I needed proof, and you just gave it to me." Avery stared at him. The files, the recording, the journalist. You just handed me everything I need to take Tanner down." "And what happens to me?" Brennan stood. "That depends. Are you willing to testify against Tanner?" "Against everyone involved. A court-martial. Full military tribunal. You tell them what you saw, what you heard, what you know. And we make sure it sticks." Avery's chest was tight. "And if I do that, I'm dead. If you don't, you're dead anyway. At least this way you take them with you." Avery looked at the floor, at the scuffed tile, at the bloodstains she could still see on her hands even though they weren't there anymore. Then she looked up. "When do we start?" Brennan's expression didn't change, but something in his eyes shifted. "Now." He unlocked her cuffs and led her out of the interrogation room. As they walked down the hallway, Avery's phone, still in the evidence bag Dawson had confiscated, started buzzing. Brennan stopped and pulled it out. The screen showed a single notification. A news alert from the Sentinel. The headline read, "Military cover-up exposed. Colonel ordered sacrifice of U.S. medical unit. Classified documents reveal." Brennan handed her the phone. Avery read the first paragraph, then the second. Then she stopped, because at the bottom of the article there was a quote from Colonel Richard Tanner. "These allegations are baseless and defamatory. Ms. Lawson is a disgraced soldier attempting to rewrite history. I will be filing charges against her and anyone who assists in spreading these lies." Avery looked up at Brennan. "He's coming for me." Brennan nodded. "He's coming for all of us." "What do we do?" Brennan's expression hardened. "We finish it." They walked out of the federal building into the midday sun, and Avery realized, for the first time in 3 years, she wasn't running anymore. She was standing her ground, and the war had just begun. The news broke like a grenade going off in the middle of a quiet room. Within 2 hours of the Sentinel's article hitting the internet, every major network had picked it up. By noon, Avery's face was on television screens across the country, not as a suspect, but as the whistleblower who'd exposed one of the military's darkest secrets. Brennan drove them to a safe location, a nondescript office building on the outskirts of Capital City, that housed a military legal team specializing in internal investigations. The building was unmarked, surrounded by concrete barriers and security checkpoints that made the federal building look like a shopping mall. Inside, Avery was led to a conference room where 3 officers in dress uniforms waited. 2 men, 1 woman, all wearing ranks high enough that Avery's instinct was to stand at attention. Brennan gestured for her to sit. "This is Major General Claire Hobbs, Brigadier General Thomas Richter, and Colonel Daniel Vega. They're heading the inquiry into Operation Silent Ridge." General Hobbs was in her late 50s, with silver hair pulled back in a tight bun and eyes that looked like they'd seen every lie the military had to offer. She didn't smile when Avery sat down. "Ms. Lawson, or should I say Sergeant Lawson? I was discharged. Avery's fine." "You were discharged under investigation. That's different from a clean separation." "I'm aware." Hobbs folded her hands on the table. "Let's be clear. You're not here as a hero. You're here as a witness. A very complicated witness. You disobeyed orders, fled a combat zone with civilians instead of your unit, and spent 3 years hiding from an investigation. Now you've surfaced with classified documents and allegations that, if true, implicate a sitting colonel in war crimes. Do you understand the gravity of what you've done?" "Yes." "Do you understand that if you're lying, if any part of your story is fabricated, you'll be charged with treason?" "I'm not lying." Hobbs leaned back. "Then walk us through it. Start to finish. No editorializing. Just facts." Avery took a breath and began. She told them about the mission, the base, the civilians who came in wounded and desperate. She told them about the mortar strike, the chaos, the impossible math of who could be saved and who couldn't. She told them about Joel's voice on the radio, begging for extraction, and the choice she made to load the transport with people who still had a chance. When she got to the part about Derek and the flash drive, General Richter interrupted. "Lieutenant Collier contacted you directly?" "Yes." "Why?" "Because he knew I was the only one who'd believe him, and the only one who had nothing left to lose." "That's not an answer." "It's the only one I have." Colonel Vega spoke for the first time. His voice was quieter than the others, but it carried weight. "You said the recording implicates Colonel Tanner. What exactly did it say?" Avery recited the conversation from memory, every word, every pause, every cold, calculated syllable. When she finished, the room was silent. Hobbs exchanged a glance with Richter. Then she looked back at Avery. "We've reviewed the files you sent to the journalist. The financial records alone are damning. Offshore accounts tied to Tanner, payments to foreign intelligence operatives, communication intercepts that show he was in contact with hostiles in the region. If this goes to court-martial, he's done." "If?" Avery said. "Colonel Tanner has friends, high-ranking friends, people who will fight very hard to make this go away quietly." "Then fight harder." Hobbs' expression didn't change. "We intend to, but you need to understand what you're walking into. Tanner's legal team will destroy you on the stand. They'll bring up every decision you made that day, every hesitation, every mistake. They'll paint you as a coward who's using this case to cover her own failures. Let them. You say that now, but when you're in front of a tribunal with cameras rolling and your entire life dissected in public, you might feel differently." Avery met her eyes. "I've already lost everything. What else can they take?" Hobbs studied her for a long moment. Then she nodded. "All right, we'll move forward, but you stay here, under military protection. No contact with the outside world until the tribunal. Understood?" "Understood." Brennan led Avery out of the conference room and down a hallway to a small dormitory. It had a bed, a desk, a window with bars. It looked like every temporary barracks she'd ever stayed in. "You'll be safe here," Brennan said. "For how long?" "As long as it takes." Avery sat down on the bed. "What happens if they don't convict him?" "They will. You don't know that." Brennan leaned against the doorframe. "Joel talked about you. A lot. He said you were the best medic he'd ever worked with. Said you could make decisions under fire that most officers couldn't make with all the time in the world. He trusted you. And I got him killed. No, Tanner got him killed. You just kept other people from dying with him." Avery looked down at her hands. "Does that make it better?" "No, but it makes it true." Brennan left and the door locked behind him. Avery lay back on his bed and stared at the ceiling. For the first time in 72 hours, she was alone, truly alone. No one chasing her. No one demanding answers. Just silence. And in that silence, the weight of everything finally hit her. Derek was dead. Her name was all over the news. The people she'd worked with at Harbor Ridge were probably being questioned, harassed, dragged into a mess they didn't sign up for. And somewhere out there, Colonel Richard Tanner was preparing to burn her alive in front of the world. She closed her eyes and tried to sleep. She couldn't. The next morning, Brennan returned with breakfast and a tablet. "You're going to want to see this." He pulled up a video. It was a press conference. Colonel Tanner stood behind a podium, flanked by lawyers and military brass. His uniform was pristine. His face was calm. He looked like a man who'd done nothing wrong. "I want to address the recent allegations made against me," Tanner said, his voice steady. "These claims are categorically false. They are the product of a disgraced former soldier who has spent 3 years avoiding accountability for her own actions. Sergeant Avery Lawson abandoned her unit in a combat zone. She prioritized foreign nationals over American soldiers. And when the military rightly investigated her for those decisions, she fled. Now she's attempting to rewrite history by fabricating evidence and implicating me in a conspiracy that never existed." A reporter shouted a question. "Colonel, what about the financial records, the offshore accounts?" Tanner didn't flinch. "Those records are either fabricated or taken out of context. My legal team is conducting a full audit, and I'm confident we'll prove that every transaction was legitimate and above board." "And the recording? The one where you allegedly ordered the leak?" "There is no recording, or if there is, it's been doctored. Voice manipulation technology is widely available. Anyone with a computer and an agenda can create a fake audio file. That's what we're dealing with here. A smear campaign designed to distract from the real story, which is that Sergeant Lawson failed her unit and is now trying to blame me for her failures." Another reporter. "Will you testify at the tribunal?" "Absolutely. I have nothing to hide, and I look forward to clearing my name." The video ended. Avery set the tablet down. Her hands were shaking. "He's good," she said quietly. "He's a liar," Brennan replied. "Same thing. Not in front of a tribunal, not when we have the evidence. He's going to say it's fake. He's going to say, 'I made it all up,' and half the country is going to believe him." Brennan sat down across from her. "Then we make sure the other half doesn't." Over the next week, Avery was prepped for the tribunal. Military lawyers grilled her on every detail of the mission. They ran her through mock cross-examinations, throwing every dirty question Tanner's defense could possibly ask. "Why didn't you save your commanding officer?" "Because he was already dead." "You don't know that. You didn't check." "There wasn't time." "So you guessed." "I made a judgment call." "Based on what? Your feelings?" "Based on triage. Based on the fact that his injuries were incompatible with life and the civilians still had a chance." "But you didn't know that for sure." "I knew enough." They hit her again and again, trying to break her, trying to find the cracks. By the third day, Avery wanted to scream. By the fifth, she wanted to walk out. But she didn't. Because every time she thought about quitting, she saw Joel's face, Sarah's, Marcus's, all the people who'd died or risked their lives because someone decided their mission was disposable. On the 8th day, General Hobbs pulled her aside. "The tribunal starts tomorrow. Are you ready?" "No." "Good. If you were, I'd be worried." "What happens if I mess up, if I say the wrong thing?" "Then Tanner walks. And everything you've done, everything Derek died for, means nothing." Avery's stomach turned. That's a lot of pressure. Welcome to the military justice system. The tribunal was held in a secure military courtroom in Capital City. The room was packed. Lawyers, officers, journalists, observers. Cameras lined the back wall, broadcasting the proceedings live. Avery sat at the witness table, her hands folded in her lap, her heart hammering so hard she thought it might burst through her chest. Across the room, Colonel Richard Tanner sat with his defense team. He looked relaxed, confident, like a man who'd already won. The presiding judge, a 3-star general named Patrick Monroe, called the room to order. This tribunal is convened to investigate allegations of misconduct, conspiracy, and dereliction of duty related to Operation Silent Ridge. The accused, Colonel Richard Tanner, is charged with willfully compromising the position of a U.S. military unit, resulting in the deaths of 12 soldiers and the endangerment of 26 civilians. How does the accused plead? Tanner stood. Not guilty, Your Honor. Monroe nodded. Prosecution, call your first witness. The lead prosecutor, a sharp-eyed lieutenant colonel named Angela Reeves, stood. The prosecution calls Avery Lawson. Avery walked to the stand. Her legs felt like concrete. She was sworn in, and Reeves began. Ms. Lawson, can you describe the events of March 7th, 3 years ago? Avery took a breath and started. She told the story the same way she'd told it a dozen times before. The base, the civilians, the attack, the choice. When she got to the part about the radio calls from Joel, her voice wavered. Just slightly, but she pushed through. Reeves held up a document. This is a communication log from your unit. It shows that Captain Joel Brennan called for extraction 3 times in the span of 8 minutes. Did you receive those calls? Yes. And did you respond? I told him I'd come back, but by the time the civilians were loaded, the base was overrun. There was nothing left. Nothing left meaning what? Meaning everyone still there was already dead. Tanner's lawyer, a man named Richard Hastings, stood. Objection, speculation. Monroe nodded. Sustained. Stick to what you saw, Ms. Lawson. Avery gritted her teeth. I saw the base on fire. I heard the explosions. I knew that if I went back, I'd die too, and the civilians I just saved would die with me. Reeves nodded. Thank you. Now let's talk about the flash drive. You received classified documents from Lieutenant Derek Collier. What did those documents contain? Financial records, communication logs, a recording of a conversation between Colonel Tanner and an unknown party discussing the deliberate leak of our position. Hastings shot to his feet. Objection. The recording in question has not been authenticated. It could be fabricated. Reeves turned to him. We have testimony from a forensic audio analyst confirming the recording is genuine. Testimony is not the same as proof. Monroe banged his gavel. I'll allow it. Continue, Colonel Reeves. Reeves played the recording. The room went silent as Tanner's voice filled the air, cold and clinical, ordering the leak that would kill 12 people. When it ended, Avery looked at Tanner. His face was blank, but his hands, resting on the table, were clenched so tight his knuckles had gone white. Reeves turned back to Avery. Ms. Lawson, in your opinion, was the attack on your unit a random act of war, or was it a targeted strike? It was targeted. They knew exactly where we were. They knew when we'd be most vulnerable, and they knew we wouldn't have air support. And who had access to that information? Command, intelligence, anyone in the operational chain. Including Colonel Tanner? Yes. Hastings stood for cross-examination. He walked toward Avery slowly, his hands in his pockets, his expression almost friendly. Ms. Lawson, you've been through a lot. I can only imagine how difficult this has been for you. Avery didn't respond, but I have to ask, are you absolutely certain that the voice on that recording belongs to Colonel Tanner? Yes. Have you ever met Colonel Tanner in person? No. So you're identifying him based on a recording you've heard once, 3 years after the fact, provided by a man who is now dead and cannot corroborate your story. The recording is corroborated by the financial records and the communication logs, which were also provided by Lieutenant Collier, a man who, by all accounts, was suffering from severe PTSD and paranoia. Avery's jaw tightened. He wasn't paranoid, he was right. Was he? Or was he a troubled veteran looking for someone to blame for a tragedy that had no villain? There's a villain. He's sitting right there. Hastings smiled. That's your opinion, but opinions aren't evidence. The recordings are evidence. The money trail is evidence. The fact that Derek is dead because someone didn't want this to come out is evidence. Hastings turned to the judge. Your Honor, I move to strike that statement. Lawson is speculating about Lieutenant Collier's death without any proof of who killed him. Monroe hesitated. Then he nodded. Sustained. The jury will disregard that statement. But Avery saw the faces in the room. They weren't disregarding anything. The cross-examination went on for another hour. Hastings hit her from every angle. Her decision to save the civilians, her refusal to return to the base, her 3 years in hiding. He made her sound like a coward, a liar, A woman so consumed by guilt that she'd fabricate an entire conspiracy to avoid taking responsibility. By the time he was done, Avery felt like she'd been stripped down to nothing, but she didn't break. When the day's session ended, Brennan met her outside the courtroom. "You did good." "I don't feel good." "You weren't supposed to. That's how they work. They tear you apart so the jury questions everything you say." "Is it working?" "Not yet, but we're not done." The next day, the prosecution called its final witness. Kate Ellison, the journalist from the Sentinel, took the stand. She was in her 40s, with short dark hair and a no-nonsense demeanor that made it clear she wasn't intimidated by the room full of military brass. Reeves walked her through the files Derek had provided, the steps she'd taken to verify them, and the conclusions she'd drawn. "In your professional opinion, Ms. Ellison, are the documents authentic?" "Yes. I had 3 independent forensic analysts review the financial records and the audio recording. All 3 confirmed they're genuine." "And what did you find in those financial records?" "Payments from Colonel Tanner to foreign intelligence operatives in the region where Operation Silent Ridge took place, transfers that occurred in the weeks leading up to the attack, and communications between Tanner and those operatives discussing troop movements and base locations." The room erupted in whispers. Monroe banged his gavel. "Order." Hastings stood. "Your Honor, I have serious concerns about the chain of custody for these documents. They were obtained illegally, handled by unauthorized personnel, and provided to a civilian journalist before being presented to this tribunal. They should be inadmissible." Reeves shot back. "They were obtained by a military officer acting on suspicion of misconduct. That makes them admissible under the Uniform Code of Military Justice." Monroe leaned back. "I'll take this under advisement. We'll reconvene tomorrow for closing arguments." That night, Avery couldn't sleep. She lay in the barracks, staring at the ceiling, replaying every moment of the trial in her head. She'd done everything she could, said everything she needed to say, but she didn't know if it was enough. The next morning, she was escorted back to the courtroom for closing arguments. The room was even more packed than before. Every seat was filled. Cameras were everywhere. Reeves stood and addressed the tribunal. "This case is about accountability, about the fundamental principle that no one, no matter how high their rank, is above the law. Colonel Tanner betrayed his oath. He compromised a military operation. He sacrificed 12 soldiers to cover his tracks. And when the truth started to come out, he tried to bury it. The evidence is clear, the testimony is consistent, and the verdict should be guilty." Hastings stood next. "This case is about a witch hunt, about a system that would rather destroy a decorated officer than admit that sometimes, in war, people die for no reason. Sergeant Lawson made a choice that day, a choice that cost lives. And instead of accepting responsibility, she spent 3 years building a conspiracy theory to justify it. The so-called evidence is circumstantial at best, fabricated at worst, and the verdict should be not guilty." Monroe called for a recess while the tribunal deliberated. Avery waited in a side room with Brennan. Minutes felt like hours. Finally, they were called back in. Monroe read the verdict. "On the charge of willfully compromising the position of a U.S. military unit, we find the accused guilty." The room exploded. Tanner's face went white. Avery felt her knees buckle, and Brennan caught her. Monroe continued. "Colonel Richard Tanner, you are hereby stripped of rank, dishonorably discharged, and remanded to military custody pending sentencing. This tribunal is adjourned." The gavel came down, and just like that, it was over. Avery walked out of the courtroom into a wall of reporters. Cameras flashed, questions shouted, but she didn't stop. She kept walking, Brennan at her side until they were outside. The sun was setting, the air was cool, and for the first time in 3 years, Avery could breathe. "You did it," Brennan said. "We did it. What now?" Avery looked out at the city, at the lights coming on as the day faded. "I go back, to Harbor Ridge, to the ER, to the job." "You sure?" "Yeah, I'm sure," Brennan nodded. "Joel would be proud." Avery's throat tightened. "I hope so." She turned to walk away and Brennan called after her. "Lawson." She stopped. "There's one more thing. We found something in Tanner's files, something he tried to delete before the trial." "What?" Brennan handed her a folder. Avery opened it. Inside was a list of names, operatives, assets, people Tanner had been working with. And at the bottom of the list, one name stood out: Agent Margaret Voss. Avery's blood went cold. "She's been working for him the whole time," Brennan said quietly. Avery stared at the name, at the proof that the woman who'd been hunting her, interrogating her, threatening her, had been Tanner's partner from the start. "Where is she now?" Avery asked. "Gone. Disappeared the second the verdict came down. We're looking, but she's a professional. She knows how to vanish." Avery closed the folder. "Find her." Brennan met her eyes. "We will." But as Avery walked away, she knew one thing for certain. This wasn't over. Not yet. Avery didn't go back to Greyhaven right away. She couldn't. Not while Voss was still out there. Not while the woman who'd spent weeks manipulating her, threatening her, using her as bait, was somewhere in the wind with all the training and resources of a federal agent. She stayed in Capital City for 3 more days, holed up in the military barracks while Brennan's team tore through Voss's digital footprint. Bank accounts, travel records, known associates, every breadcrumb she'd left behind. On the 4th day, Brennan walked into Avery's room with a tablet and a grim expression. "We found her." Avery sat up. "Where?" "Greyhaven. She went back." "Why would she go back?" "Because she's not running. She's cleaning up." Avery's blood went cold. "Harbor Ridge, like..." Brennan nodded. "We think she's going after anyone who can tie her to Tanner. Witnesses, staff, people who saw her at the hospital. Marcus, Deanna. We've already sent a team, but we need you there. You know the hospital. You know the people. And if Voss sees federal agents coming, she'll bolt. But if she sees me, she'll think you're alone, vulnerable. She'll make a move." Avery stood. "When do we leave?" "Now." They flew into Greyhaven on a military transport, landing at a private airfield just outside the city. 2 unmarked cars were waiting. Brennan rode with Avery in the lead vehicle, a tactical team in the car behind them. The drive to Harbor Ridge took 20 minutes. The city looked the same as it had 2 weeks ago: gray, industrial, indifferent. But Avery felt different. She wasn't the quiet new nurse anymore. She wasn't invisible. She was the person everyone was looking for. They parked 3 blocks from the hospital and approached on foot. Brennan's team spread out, covering exits and high ground. Avery and Brennan went in through the main entrance, badges clipped to their belts, weapons concealed under jackets. The ER was busy, but not chaotic. Evening shift. Steady flow of patients. Nurses moving between rooms with the practiced efficiency of people who'd done this 1,000 times. Deanna was at the nurses' station. When she saw Avery, her face went pale. "You're back." "I'm back. Where's Marcus?" "In Bay 2. He's got a trauma case. Get him. Now. And get everyone into the break room. Staff only. Lock the doors." Deanna's eyes went wide. "What's happening?" "Someone's coming. Someone dangerous. And I need everyone out of the line of fire." Deanna didn't argue. She grabbed the nearest nurse and started spreading the word. Within 5 minutes, the ER staff was being funneled into the break room. Confused, scared, but moving. Marcus appeared from Bay 2, his hands still gloved, his face tight with concern. "Avery, what the hell is going on?" "Voss is here, the federal agent. She's been working with Tanner. She's cleaning up loose ends." Marcus's face went from concern to shock. "She's here? In the hospital?" "We think so. Brennan's team is sweeping the building, but I need you to get everyone out. Patients, visitors, anyone who's not essential." "I can't just evacuate the ER." "You can and you will. Call it a gas leak. Call it a bomb threat. I don't care. Just get them out." Marcus stared at her for a long moment. Then he nodded and pulled out his phone. Avery turned to Brennan. Where would she go, if she wanted to watch without being seen? Brennan scanned the room. Security office, upper floor. She'd have access to cameras, exits, and a clear sightline to the ER. "Let's go." They moved through the hospital like ghosts, avoiding the main hallways, taking service stairs that most staff didn't even know existed. Avery's heart was hammering, but her hands were steady. She'd been in worse situations, been hunted by worse people. But Voss was different. Voss had a badge. Authority. The kind of cover that let her walk into a room and shoot someone without anyone questioning it until it was too late. They reached the third floor and found the security office. The door was locked. Brennan pulled a small tool from his pocket and worked the lock. It clicked open in seconds. Inside, the office was dark. A bank of monitors lined one wall, showing feeds from cameras all over the hospital, the ER, the parking lot, the stairwells. And sitting in the chair facing the monitors was Agent Margaret Voss. She didn't turn around. "I was wondering when you'd show up," she said quietly. Avery stepped inside, her hand moving toward the weapon under her jacket. Voss raised her hands slowly, keeping them visible. "Relax. I'm not here to fight." "Then why are you here?" Brennan asked. "Same reason you are, to finish it." Voss finally turned around. She looked different, tired. Her suit was wrinkled, her hair pulled back in a messy ponytail. The stone mask was gone. "I know what you think of me," Voss said. "And you're right. I helped Tanner. I buried evidence. I manipulated the investigation to keep the truth from coming out." "Why?" Avery asked. "Because I was ordered to. Because Tanner had leverage on me. Because I made a mistake 10 years ago, and he's been holding it over my head ever since." "What mistake?" Voss looked down at her hands. "I killed someone, a suspect during an interrogation. It was an accident, but it was still a line I crossed. Tanner found out. He offered me a choice, help him or he'd turn me in." Avery's jaw tightened. "So you chose to let 12 soldiers die?" "I chose to survive, and I've regretted it every day since. Regret doesn't bring them back." "I know." Voss met her eyes. "But maybe stopping Tanner does. Maybe making sure he never does this again counts for something." Brennan stepped forward. "You're under arrest." "I know. But before you take me in, there's something you need to see." Voss turned back to the monitors and pulled up a file on the computer. It was a video feed, time-stamped from earlier that day. The video showed Tanner in a holding cell talking to someone off camera. His lawyer, probably. But the audio was clear. "I want Lawson dead. I don't care how you do it. Make it look like an accident, a mugging, a car crash. Just make sure it can't be traced back to me." The lawyer's voice. "And if she's under military protection, then you find a way around it. I'm not spending the rest of my life in prison because some bleeding heart medic couldn't follow orders." The video ended. Avery stared at the screen. "When was this recorded?" "This morning, 2 hours after the verdict came down." "He's still trying to kill me." "He's desperate. And desperate people make mistakes." Voss stood. "I copied this file and sent it to the prosecutors. It's enough to add conspiracy to commit murder to his charges. He's never getting out." Brennan pulled out handcuffs. "That doesn't change what you did." "I know, but at least now it's over." Voss held out her wrists, and Brennan cuffed her. As they led her out of the security office, Voss stopped and looked at Avery. "For what it's worth, I'm sorry. I didn't think you'd survive this long. I didn't think anyone would." Avery didn't respond. She just watched as Brennan led Voss down the hallway toward the waiting tactical team. By the time Avery made it back to the ER, the building had been cleared. Patients were being transferred to other hospitals. Staff were gathered in the parking lot, confused and shaken. Marcus found her near the ambulance bay. "Is it over?" "It's over." He exhaled, long and slow. "What happens now?" "Now I go back to work." Marcus frowned. "You sure that's a good idea, after everything that's happened?" "It's the only idea I've got." "Avery, you just took down a colonel and a federal agent. You could do anything. Go anywhere. Why stay here?" Avery looked at the hospital, at the building where she'd saved 23 lives, where she'd been dragged out in handcuffs, where she'd fought to prove she wasn't the person everyone thought she was. "Because this is where it started, and this is where it ends." Marcus nodded slowly. Then he held out his hand. "Welcome back." Avery shook it. The next morning, Avery reported for her shift at 6 a.m. She walked through the main entrance, past the nurses' station, past the trauma bays where she'd worked under fire and under suspicion. Deanna was at the desk. When she saw Avery, she stood. "We need to talk." Avery braced herself. "About what?" "About the fact that you're a hero, and we treated you like a criminal. You didn't know." "That's not an excuse." Deanna's voice cracked. "You saved lives here. You saved this entire department, and we let the feds walk you out like you were nothing." "It's fine. It's not fine, and I'm sorry." Avery didn't know what to say, so she just nodded. Sandra Ortiz appeared from one of the exam rooms carrying a tray of supplies. When she saw Avery, she stopped. For a long moment, they just stared at each other. Then Sandra set down the tray and walked over. "I was wrong about you," Sandra said quietly. "You didn't know. I should have known. I should have trusted you. Instead, I judged you." "You're not the only one." Sandra's eyes glistened. "I read the news. What you did, what you've been carrying, I can't imagine. And I'm sorry." Avery's throat tightened. "Thank you." Sandra held out her hand. Avery shook it. The shift started and Avery fell back into the rhythm. Patients came in. She triaged, treated, stabilized. The work was the same, but the looks were different. People didn't avoid her anymore. They didn't whisper when she walked past. They watched her with something that looked like respect. At noon, Dr. Raymond Langston appeared in the ER. The chief who'd walked into a closet during the mass casualty event and hadn't come back out. He approached Avery near the supply room. "Ms. Lawson, a word." Avery followed him into his office. It was small, cluttered, smelling faintly of coffee and stress. Langston sat down behind his desk and gestured for her to sit. "I owe you an apology," he said. "You don't." "I do. I failed you. I failed this department. When the crisis hit, I froze. And you stepped up. You took control. You saved lives. And instead of recognizing that, I let the feds drag you out without a fight. You didn't know what was happening." "I should have." Langston leaned forward. "I've been doing this job for 20 years. And in those 20 years, I've never seen anyone handle a mass casualty event the way you did. You didn't just save patients. You saved the entire system from collapsing." Avery didn't respond. Langston pulled out a folder and slid it across the desk. "I'm offering you a position. Senior trauma nurse. Leadership track. You'd be second in command of the ER, reporting directly to me." Avery stared at the folder. "Why?" "Because you've earned it. Because this department needs someone like you. And because I don't want to lose the best nurse we've ever had." Avery opened the folder. Inside was a contract, a job description, a salary that was nearly double what she'd been making. "I don't know," she said quietly. "You don't have to decide now. Take some time. Think about it. But Avery, whatever you decide, you have a place here. You'll always have a place here." Avery closed the folder and stood. "Thank you." She walked out of Langston's office and back onto the ER floor. The rest of the shift passed in a blur. By the time 11 p.m. rolled around, Avery was exhausted. She clocked out, changed out of her scrubs, and walked to the parking lot. Brennan was waiting by her car. "Thought you'd gone back to Capital City," Avery said. "I did, but I wanted to check in before I left for good." "Everything wrapped up?" "Voss is in custody. Tanner's facing additional charges. The tribunal findings are being reviewed by Congress. It's as done as it's going to get." Avery nodded. "And Joel?" "Joel's officially exonerated, so is the rest of your unit. Their families are being notified. There's going to be a memorial service next month. You're invited, if you want to come." Avery looked down. "I don't know if I can." "You don't have to, but Joel would have wanted you there." She met his eyes. "Would he? After what I did?" Brennan's voice was soft. "He called you his best friend, said you were the bravest person he'd ever worked with. He knew the risks, he knew the job, and he knew you'd make the right call, even if it was the hardest one." Avery's eyes burned. "I wish I'd saved him. I wish you had too. But you saved 20 other people, and that matters." Brennan handed her an envelope. "What's this?" "A letter. From Joel. He wrote it before the deployment, asked me to hold on to it in case something happened to him." Avery's hands shook as she took the envelope. "Read it when you're ready," Brennan said. Then he walked to his car and drove away. Avery sat in her car for a long time, staring at the envelope. Finally, she opened it. The letter was short, handwritten. Joel's messy scrawl that she'd seen 100 times on mission briefs. "Avery, if you're reading this, it means I didn't make it. And if I didn't make it, it means you probably think it's your fault. It's not. I know you. I know you'll second guess every decision, every call, every moment you hesitated. But here's the thing. You don't hesitate. Not when it matters. That's why you're the best medic I've ever worked with. Whatever choice you made, I know it was the right one. Because you don't make the easy choice. You make the one that saves the most lives. Even if it costs you everything. Don't carry this. Don't let it break you. Live, fight, save people. That's what you do. That's who you are. I'm proud of you. Always have been. Joel Avery read the letter 3 times. Then she folded it carefully and put it back in the envelope. She wiped her eyes, started the car, and drove home. The weeks that followed were a strange blur of normalcy and transformation. Avery signed the contract Langston had offered her. Senior trauma nurse, leadership track, a voice in how the ER ran. Within a month, she'd restructured the triage system, implementing protocols she'd learned in combat zones, protocols that prioritized speed and accuracy over bureaucracy. She trained the staff on rapid assessment techniques, taught them how to make life or death decisions in seconds, and showed them what real leadership looked like under fire. The staff who'd doubted her now came to her for advice. The doctors who'd questioned her judgment now deferred to her expertise. And the patients who came through those doors had no idea that the woman saving their lives had spent 3 years running from her own. But Avery knew, and she carried it with her every day. 3 months after the tribunal, a package arrived at Harbor Ridge addressed to Avery. No return address, just her name in neat handwriting. Inside was a medal, the Silver Star, and a letter from the Secretary of Defense, Ms. Lawson. In recognition of your extraordinary courage and selfless service during Operation Silent Ridge, and your unwavering pursuit of justice in the face of systemic corruption, you are hereby awarded the Silver Star for valor. Your actions saved 20 civilian lives and exposed a conspiracy that threatened the integrity of our armed forces. Your service honors all who wear the uniform. Avery stared at the medal for a long time. Then she put it in a drawer and went back to work. She didn't need a medal to tell her what she'd done. She already knew. 6 months after the tribunal, Avery stood in front of a room full of nursing students at Greyhaven Medical College. The dean had asked her to give a lecture on trauma care. She'd agreed reluctantly. The students were young, eager, idealistic. They looked at her like she had all the answers. She didn't. But she had experience, and she had scars. And maybe that was enough. Combat nursing isn't about heroism, she began. It's about math. Cold, brutal math. You've got 10 patients and 6 beds. You've got 12 units of blood and 15 people who need it. You've got 30 seconds to decide who lives and who doesn't. The room was silent. And here's the thing, they don't teach you in textbooks. You're going to make mistakes. You're going to lose people you could have saved if you'd had more time, more resources, more hands. And you're going to carry those losses for the rest of your life. A student in the front row raised her hand. How do you deal with that? Avery met her eyes. You don't. You just keep going, because the next patient doesn't care about your guilt. They care about whether you can save them. Another hand went up. What if you make the wrong call? There is no wrong call. There's only the call you make with the information you have, and you live with it. But what if people die because of your decision? Avery's voice went quiet. Then people die. And you make sure their deaths mean something. You make sure you learn. You make sure the next time you're better. The lecture went on for another hour. Avery talked about triage protocols, about mass casualty management, about the psychological toll of working in high-stakes environments. She talked about everything she'd learned in 3 years of war and 3 years of running. When it was over, the students filed out slowly, some of them stopping to shake her hand, to thank her, to tell her she'd inspired them. Avery didn't feel inspiring. She felt tired. But as she packed up her notes and walked out of the lecture hall, she realized something. She wasn't running anymore. She was teaching, building, creating something that would outlast her. And maybe that was enough. 1 year after the tribunal, Harbor Ridge Medical held a ceremony. It was small, attended by staff and a few reporters who'd followed the story from the beginning. Dr. Langston stood at a podium in the main lobby, next to a plaque that read, "In recognition of Avery Lawson, whose courage, skill, and leadership saved 23 lives during the Highway 29 crisis, and whose pursuit of justice honors all who serve." Langston gestured for Avery to join him. She walked to the podium, and the room erupted in applause. She didn't cry, didn't smile, just stood there, looking out at the faces of people who'd seen her at her lowest and still chose to stand with her. When the applause died down, Langston handed her the microphone. Avery looked at the plaque, at her name, carved into metal, permanent. Then she looked at the crowd. "I didn't do this for recognition," she said. "I did it because it was the right thing to do, because 12 people died and someone needed to make sure their deaths meant something." She paused. "A lot of people ask me how I survived, how I kept going when everything was against me. And the truth is, I didn't do it alone. I had people who believed in me when I didn't believe in myself, people who fought for me when I couldn't fight anymore." She looked at Marcus, at Deanna, at Sandra, at Brennan, standing in the back of the room. "So if this plaque means anything, it's not about me. It's about all of us. About what we can do when we refuse to look away, when we refuse to let the truth be buried." The room was silent. Then someone started clapping. Then another. Then the entire room. Avery handed the microphone back to Langston and walked off the stage. As she passed through the crowd, people reached out to shake her hand, to thank her, to tell her she'd changed their lives. And for the first time in years, Avery didn't feel like she was carrying the weight of the dead. She felt like she was carrying their legacy forward. 3 weeks after the ceremony, Avery stood in a military cemetery in Virginia. The sun was bright, the air cool. Rows of white headstones stretched out in every direction. She wasn't alone. Brennan was there. So were the families of the soldiers who died in Operation Silent Ridge. Mothers, fathers, siblings, children who'd never really known the people they'd lost. A chaplain spoke, then a general, then Brennan. When it was Avery's turn, she walked to the podium and looked out at the gathered crowd. "I didn't know most of the people we're honoring today," she said. "I knew Joel, I knew Sarah Vega, I knew Marcus Trent, but the others, I only knew their names from the mission roster." She paused, her voice steady. "But I knew what they did. I knew they put themselves in harm's way to help people they'd never met. I knew they followed orders even when those orders were impossible. And I knew they trusted me to make the right call when everything went wrong." Her throat tightened. "I didn't save them. I saved the people they were trying to protect. And I've spent 3 years wondering if that was enough, if that was the right choice, if I should have done something different." She looked at the headstones, at the names carved into white marble. "But Joel wrote me a letter. And in that letter he said, I don't make the easy choice. I make the one that saves the most lives, even if it costs me everything." She looked back at the crowd. He was right, and I'd make the same choice again, because that's the job. That's what they signed up for. That's what I signed up for. Her voice broke just slightly. "But I also want them to know I didn't forget them. I didn't move on. I carried them with me every single day, and I'll keep carrying them until the day I die." She stepped back from the podium. The ceremony ended, and people began to disperse. Avery walked among the headstones, reading the names, touching the cold marble. When she reached Joel's grave, she knelt down. "I'm sorry I couldn't save you," she whispered, "but I promise, I won't waste what you gave me. I won't let them bury the truth. And I won't stop fighting." She placed a hand on the headstone. "Thank you for believing in me, even when I didn't believe in myself." She stood and walked back to where Brennan was waiting. "You okay?" he asked. "I will be." "What now?" Avery looked out at the cemetery, at the rows of people who'd given everything. "Now I go back. I take the job. I train the next generation. I make sure no one else has to make the choice I made." Brennan nodded. "Joel would be proud." "I hope so." That night, Avery sat in her apartment, still small, still plain, but no longer a hiding place. She pulled out Joel's letter and read it one more time. Live, fight, save people. That's what you do. That's who you are. She folded the letter and put it in a frame on her desk. Then she opened her laptop and started writing. Not a report, not a statement, a training manual for medics, for nurses, for anyone who might one day face the impossible choice between who lives and who dies. She wrote about triage, about prioritization, about the brutal math of survival. But she also wrote about something else, about the fact that sometimes the right choice is the one that haunts you, the one that costs you everything, the one that no one will ever thank you for, and about how you keep going anyway, because that's the job, that's the oath, that's the line you hold, no matter what. She wrote until the sun came up, and when she was done, she sent the draft to Brennan with a single message. "Make sure this gets to the people who need it." He replied an hour later. "Already done. The brass wants to make it required reading for all combat medics. You just changed how the military trains its medical personnel. Avery stared at the message. Changed how the military trains. Joel, Sarah, Marcus, all the others. Their deaths had meant something after all. She closed her laptop and looked out the window. The city was waking up. People heading to work. Cars filling the streets. Life moving forward. And for the first time in 3 years, Avery felt like she was part of it. Not a ghost. Not a fugitive. Not a person running from her past. A person who'd faced it. Who'd survived it. Who'd made sure it would never happen again. 2 years after the tribunal, Avery stood in the ER during another mass casualty event. A factory explosion on the south side. 17 critical patients inbound. But this time, the system didn't collapse. The staff moved like a machine, efficient and coordinated. Triage was clean, priorities were clear, no one hesitated. No one froze, because they'd been trained by someone who knew what real chaos looked like. By the end of the shift, all 17 patients were stable. 0 deaths. Marcus found Avery near the nurse's station, his face exhausted but relieved. "You did it again. We did it, all of us. No, you built this. You taught us how to do this." Avery looked around the ER, at the staff who'd doubted her, at the system she'd rebuilt from the ground up. They learned fast, because they had a good teacher. Avery smiled, just slightly. Joel would have liked that. He would have been proud. They stood in silence for a moment, watching the organized chaos of an ER that had learned how to function under fire. Then Marcus spoke again. "What's next for you?" "What do you mean?" "You've fixed this place. Trained the staff. Built something that's going to last long after you're gone. What's the next challenge?" Avery thought about it. About the years she'd spent running. About the years she'd spent rebuilding. "I don't know. Maybe nothing. Maybe this is enough." Marcus shook his head. "You're not a this is enough kind of person. Maybe I should be. But you're not." Avery looked at him. "Then I guess I'll figure it out when I get there." "Fair enough." 3 months later, Avery received a call from the Department of Defense. They wanted her to consult on a new training program for combat medics. Her manual had been implemented across all branches, and now they wanted her input on field exercises, simulation protocols, and curriculum development. She said yes, not because she wanted to go back to war, but because she wanted to make sure the next generation of medics didn't have to face what she'd faced alone. 5 years after the tribunal, Avery stood on a stage at a national medical conference. The room was packed with nurses, doctors, medics, and first responders from across the country. She was the keynote speaker. The topic? Leadership in crisis. She talked about the Highway 29 explosion, about the choices she'd made, about the systems she'd built, but she also talked about Operation Silent Ridge, about the 12 soldiers who'd died, about the 20 civilians who'd lived, about the 3 years she'd spent running and the years she'd spent fighting. "I'm not a hero," she said, her voice carrying across the silent room. "I'm just someone who refused to let the truth be buried, who refused to let 12 deaths be meaningless, who refused to stop fighting when everyone told me to walk away." She paused. "And if there's one thing I want you to take from this, it's this. You don't have to be perfect. You don't have to have all the answers. You just have to keep showing up, keep fighting, keep saving the people in front of you." The room erupted in applause. Avery stepped off the stage, and as she walked through the crowd, people stopped her, thanked her, told her she'd changed their lives. And this time, Avery believed them, because she'd changed her own life too. That night, Avery sat in her hotel room and pulled out her phone. She scrolled through her contacts until she found Brennan's number. She sent him a message. "Thank you for everything." He replied a minute later. "Joel would be proud. So am I." Avery set down the phone and looked out at the city lights. She thought about the girl she'd been 3 years ago, scared, alone, running. And she thought about the woman she'd become, not fearless, not perfect, but strong. And that was enough. The next morning, Avery flew back to Greyhaven. She walked into Harbor Ridge Medical, clocked in, and started her shift. The ER was busy. Always was. But Avery didn't mind, because this was where she belonged. Not because it was easy, but because it was where she could make a difference. One patient at a time. One life at a time. One choice at a time. And as she moved through the controlled chaos of another shift, Avery realized something. She wasn't carrying the weight of the dead anymore. She was carrying their hope, their belief that the world could be better, that people could be saved, that the right choice, no matter how hard, was always worth making, and she'd spend the rest of her life proving them right.